Vocal revolution. Vocal revolution. Vocal revolution. Vocal revolution. Change the world with your voice.
Great. So welcome everyone to the Vocal Revolution, where we talk about changing the world with our voices, personally and collectively. And today we're going to be talking about how we can support safe, healthy expression around intimate content on TV, film and theatre, and how this relates to issues around healthy expression in wider society. And I just want to thank you wherever you are, whatever time of day it is that you're tuning in and listening. Thank you for spending your time with us today. I'm just so thrilled you're tuning in, and I know you're going to get so much from this amazing episode, because my guest today is really making a global revolutionary impact on the world, and I'm so honoured to introduce Ita O'Brien. She is the UK's leading intimacy coordinator and founder of Intimacy on Set, her company which she set up in 2018 to provide services to TV, film and theatre when dealing with intimacy, sexual content and nudity. Ita pioneered the role of the intimacy coordinator, and since 2014 has been developing best practice intimacy on set guidelines, which have been widely adopted in the industry and championed by the Time's Up movement and others advocating for safe, fair and dignified work for everyone. Ita has worked on numerous high-profile productions including Normal People, Sex Education, Gangs of London and It's a Sin. Writer, actor and director of I May Destroy You, Michaela Cole, dedicated her BAFTA award last year to Ita, thanking her for making the safe space, for creating physical, emotional and professional boundaries so we can make work about exploitation, loss of respect, about abuse of power without being exploited or abused in the process. And that's one of just many, many accolades that Ita's amazing work has received. Ita and I have worked together since 2014 when she approached me about my Sounding Out coaching sessions to support the creation of a devised theatre piece, Does My Sex Offend You? And since then she's gone on to develop and implement the Intimacy on Set guidelines, and it's been such an incredible honour to support her groundbreaking work, which is having a global impact. So thank you for coming, Ita. Thank you so much, and welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Katie, and wow, what a lovely introduction. Yes, I'm humbled by that. But yes, and it's a joy for us to be sharing this together and to be celebrating our work together.
It really is, and to celebrate what the groundbreaking changes that are happening in the world and you're facilitating. So thank you for your time today. It's just such an honour to speak with you and, as you say, to celebrate the work. I just would love you to share a little bit about how you got to where you are now with our listeners. What has been your journey to this point?
So my journey in this profession has been, I actually started dancing at the age of 3. I was a scholar at the Royal Academy of Dancing, and then I trained at Bush Davis and became a professional musical theatre dancer when I was 18, and worked in that for 10 years. And then I retrained at Bristol Vic as an actor and worked as an actor for 8 years, and then did the MA in movement studies at Central. And from 2007 worked as a movement teacher and a movement director. Yes, which was really joyous, because at that point it was a really bringing together of all of my skills as a dancer and as an actor. And then I wrote my own work that I put on in 2009 called April's Fool. And then from that piece of work, I was looking at taking the dynamic that I was exploring further, and wanted to explore the dynamic of the perpetrator and the victim. It's very interesting, actually. Belfast, the film, has just come out, and that's part of my childhood, going to, my mum's from Cookstown, County Tyrone, and we would go across to the farm every year. And when the trouble started, when the sentries went up at Cookstown High Street, and you could no longer just drive the car in. Somebody had to sit in the car in case it was pulled away and bombed and all the rest of it. So in my exploration of that reconciliation, wanting to explore through a devised piece of work the idea of the perpetrator and the victim very often being the flip side of the same coin, got introduced to the Forgiveness Project, and that's set up by this fantastic lady who is a journalist, and she was interviewing both people who perpetrated the bombs in in Ireland and Northern Ireland, and those that were the victims of it, and in those conversations then ended up bringing together the perpetrator and the victim, and the reconciliation that could come from that. And so that founded the Forgiveness Project, and I was interested in looking at the flip side. So that was the inspiration around that. And in my seeking out advice, I had someone sort of saying to me, you can't do this without getting counselling yourself. So that's where I sought you. It was April 2014, wasn't it, in my preparation, and I was looking at what practices and principles I needed to put in place when asking a group of actors to come together and explore this kind of dynamic. And I started devising workshops in order to explore what sort of structure I should put in place. And that's where I came to you and I said, right, in light of this practitioner's advice saying I needed help in order to be able to she was saying, you can't possibly at your opening night have perpetrators and victims of abuses or any atrocities come sitting in the auditorium together. And I was thinking, but that is the work. That is the work of healing. That is the work of the story. But I did take her advice to go, well, actually, how do I support myself? What are the challenges that I'm going to be facing in order to keep my actors safe if I'm asking these performers to come and give of themselves in devised work? Because of course that's what you're asking in devised work, as opposed to a piece of script that the storytelling is already there. In devised work, you're sort of opening out the subject and offering your performers to read around that subject. I had a whole package of different articles for them to read and sent that to them and invited them to just pick out what resounded with them most in their preparation and to bring that ready to explore. And you're asking them to bring off themselves. So I was thinking, what is my responsibility? How do I hold a safe space? What are as I say, the practices and principles that I need to put in place in order to hold a safe space that we can really be present, conscious, grounded with ourselves, with the ensemble, in the space that we are in order to be able to explore that kind of dynamic in a really healthy way, to really go to the edges that it requires, and then most importantly to be able to safely at the end of each day and at the end of the rehearsal process to be able to honor, recognize where you've gone to, let go of where you've been artistically, to step back to yourself personally, so you can either go home that day or at the end of the whole process to leave that process behind, so that we can explore this stuff in a really professional way that supports everybody.
Wow. Yes. And that's, that is a really big, it's a big mission, isn't it? And I remember it feeling big at the time. And then what's come from it has become so huge that then from exploring those issues and really wanting to make sure that you were safe and your actors were safe and that they could come away clean, let's say, from a process like that had maybe asked them to go to places that were deep and maybe have been traumatic. But how do we hold that so that it is safe to explore those issues and to know, that you can step away and leave that behind and know that you've dealt with it, you've resolved it in the rehearsal space, rather than feeling left with residue or unresolved stuff, isn't it? So these are really big issues that you were bringing, weren't they, at the time? And from that amazing exploration and devised piece has then sprung this incredible mission, which neither of us had any idea, did we, that was going to happen when you first came to me. So it's just been an extraordinary honour to witness then you going on to develop the work. So could you explain to us perhaps about what is intimacy on set, what is an intimacy coordinator, and how perhaps that grew out of your devised work, you know, from there, how did you get to this, where you are now?
So yes, it's really lovely actually, in reflection to what you've just said, that word clean. So the actors were able to come away clean. And interestingly enough, in one of the workshops where I shared the work, which was actually in Auckland in New Zealand in December 2018, that's exactly the word that this particular actor used. I felt clean. You know, when he came back and reflected on, you know, delving into really quite a full-on intimate scene, and he said, you know, he was able to come back the following day and feel clean. So it's lovely to hear you say that. It resounds, and that's exactly it, isn't it? That in the past, as Michaela said, you know, that internal feeling of devastation. You know, or the internal devastation of the actor was her beautiful statement, and you know, of course you know, the dedication by Michaela, what was so beautiful about it is again her succinct way of really putting into a nugget what this work is about, and how this work is about taking care of a whole production. You know, so someone just sent me a statement saying, you know, that, you know, is this statement okay as an intimacy coordinator? She said, an intimacy coordinator takes care of actors. It's like, yes, but actually no. We know an intimacy coordinator is a practitioner who puts in place best practice across the arc of whole production, from producer, director, actor, DOP, first, second, third AD, wardrobe, makeup, sound, so that everybody has a really clear and professional structure within which we can openly, professionally, you know, artistically interrogate the intimate content and have a professional process to journey through in order to create, you know, what's ever asked of us within this, whatever script it is.
And so that role, you see it as across the whole production. And perhaps you can explain a little bit more about what the role involves and what the guidelines actually are that you're providing to help the whole production feel safe.
Yes, and actually it's really lovely because I remember at the end, particularly the second year of the R&D of Does My Sex Offend You, that I remember, you know, that the performers, you know, sharing how valuable the week's exploration was. And I was thinking, what have I done here? What have I actually created here? You know, because I was aware that something really profound had happened, but I wasn't too sure who it was serving most, whether it was serving the people who had experienced that you know, the week of exploration in 2015, how much it had served myself. But in the process of, you know, developing that work, I was in conversation with Meredith Dufton, who's the head of movement at Mount View, and she had an experience of you know, sort of both you know, sort of having to support student actors who had experienced different degrees of harassment or abuse, and the ripple effect that has, and then being able to be present and show up, you know, as a student actor, and then also the fact that she was encountering, you know, suddenly all the plays that she had to support for her second and third years had intimate content. And so as a head of movement, she was saying to me, I have to go and note that intimate content, and invariably the physicality doesn't tell the right storytelling. But when I say this is the kind of physicality that you do need to look at, their eyes glaze over because there wasn't a professional structure with which to create that work in a professional way. So she said to me, please, will you come and start teaching what you're developing? Yes, because, you know, this is the issue that I'm finding. So, you know, from being invited in, I sort of, again, you know, codifying or becoming conscious of what I'd put in place. And then also I co-worked with the work of Vanessa Ewan, who had already had the inspiration of watching a fight rehearsal. This is about 10 years beforehand, and having the awareness that that's the kind of structure that you need for creating intimacy. That's the kind of time and space that needs to be provided, that it is just as a fight or a dance, it is a body dance. You know, when you've got two people moving together in rhythm, you know, simulating, you know, kissing, stroking, fondling to penetration through to orgasm, then it is a body dance, you know, and it's pretend, just like a fight. And so just as a fight director or a stunt coordinator, as practitioners, we're bringing in, you know, clear techniques. We're bringing in then the structure of clear choreography. And like just as a stunt coordinator, we're bringing in our safety equipment. So we might have, so co-working with wardrobe department for modesty garments, or bringing in cushions, different shape cushions that can help bring a barrier between the two performers, so that they can personally feel safe, so that artistically they can give the best of themselves to this character and to the simulated sexual content. So that's how I, if Meredith hadn't asked me to come and teach at Mountview at that point in time, I would not be sat here now. As I was delivering the work, then the students were saying to me, well, this is great here, but what about in the industry? And so I started to sort of pull together a narrative of what I was developing and started sharing that in the industry. So the guidelines is basically inviting, just first of all, saying right from the get-go, right from the producer and the director, right from the first read of a script, just as they would do if they're looking to earmark the support that they need for the production, be it a choreographer if there's a dance, or a fight director in theatre, or a stunt coordinator in TV or film if there's a fight. If there's animals, they're going to make sure, oh look, there's an animal wanted, I'm going to need to get an animal wrangler in. So it's just going, and now include intimacy as part of that assessment. That's part of your awareness, part of what you're going to mark, and then not only just earmark it and then have the intention of journeying through that content in a with best practice, but also then providing the finances for it. And that being part of part of the structure. We're saying to directors the same thing. In the past, you might have thought, oh, there's the intimate content. And the amount of times that I have a director sort of saying about an actor, well, they read the script, as in, well, the intimate content's in the script, and they've read the script and they've said that yes, they're going to do it. So, of course they're going to do it. Whereas, and I had a director say this to me and said, oh, it says he masturbates, so he knows what's been asked of him. And I said, but there's so many ways in which you can portray that. You might just show a fly undoing and a hand going down, and the camera pans to the piano stool that he sat on and the cactus on the piano, and see the piano, the cactus vibrating, and that's a story told. So that's that will be a way that an actor might feel completely comfortable with it. Actually has an image of humor to it. And I'm actually bringing that image from a brilliant sex scene called The Tall Guy, The Tall Guy, with Emma Thompson and Jeff Goldblum. So that's one way of portraying that intimate content. Or you could ask that actor to, for it to be far more actual, which might be compromising for that actor if they want to see sort of more graphic depictions. And as I shared that with the director, you could see the light bulb moment going on, that thing of, it's not just what's written, it's what your image is of it, how it's going to be portrayed, what the choreography is, and then where the camera angles are going to go. Or if it's in theatre, again, what the choreography is, but then, perhaps very often in theatre you can abstract it. There's going to be, sort of like a way to depict it without it being very actual. So you might have perhaps someone going behind a screen, and you might see, someone undoing flies and then a rhythm happening, but actually the actors, again, is just sort of jiggling up and down, but it just gives that rhythm. So again, it's that aspect of what's the storytelling, what's wanted for this production, that's going to tell the right storytelling, but then there are so many ways in which you can portray it. So I'm asking the director to think of what's the content and how do you want it to be filmed. So they start thinking creatively. Into auditions. So we're saying to the production, if you consider it then you can be really clear in your breakdown to the casting directors and to the agents about what the content is. And then if you have on board an intimacy coordinator right from the get-go, as is now happening, with the productions that I feel I'm collaborating with best practice, is I'm there right from the get-go. There was a production that I finished filming November last year, that producer had me on board before they'd even got a director on board, before the scripts were finished being written, and certainly before they got any cast. Yes, that's how important that producer knew it was to bring me on board, because of how important the intimate content is in that storytelling. And then some of my actor friends were saying that they were that they got the breakdown, and that's exactly what happened. There was really clear statement of what the intimate content would be, and that they would be working with an intimacy coordinator. So that builds trust both for the casting director, the agents, and then the actor going forward. I promise you will get more actors than putting yourself forward, so you've got more of a possibility of getting the right actor for the job, because you're giving them hope, or you're giving them trust that you're flagging already that you're going to be working professionally, through a clear process, working with an intimacy coordinator in order to create this intimate content in a really open, professional, autonomous, and empowered way for everybody. So there's that. And then obviously, the work is then putting in place clear rehearsals, and that was a point of contention at the beginning. I had a producer and first AD saying, there's no way you can make time to rehearse the intimate content, while at the very same time on that day on the call sheet it had actors to finish their scenes, stunt rehearsal. But at that time the mindset wasn't there to actually go, the intimate content needs rehearsals just like a stunt or a dance. But that's now changed anyway. And then it just puts in place a clear process of rehearsal, clear choreography, checking, co-working with the wardrobe, and then a clear professional process for working with a closed rehearsal room and a closed set, and then through to clear guidelines around nudity, and then closure, making sure that sort of the everybody works through that work, both stepping into it in a really professional way, but also being able to close, let go of it, and step back to self in a really professional way.
Fantastic. What an incredible arc of a journey you're providing, and you're providing support, as you say, from the get-go, from the moment you start assessing the script, from the moment you start casting, before that those things are all in place. And what I heard was some really key words about trust, that you are therefore setting up trust through creating very clear agreements, and also that it's not just about, because I know artists generally sometimes really kick against what they perceive to be rules, let's say, because the artistic temperament is to always explore and to be creative and not to feel confined. But actually what I heard in what you were saying there is it's quite the opposite. It's about creating structures that support creativity, that open doors for bigger thinking about ways we portray intimacy and how creative that can be, from whether it's a cactus jiggling on a piano to someone's silhouette behind a screen. There are so many choices, and those are artistic choices. And rather than getting embarrassed about that and shying away from it, or just shutting it down and saying, well, it just has to happen, but actually there's your dialogue, and this is where voice comes in, doesn't it? Really, you are giving people permission, and through the guidelines, giving people permission to have those conversations, to say what they're comfortable doing and not doing, to say and explore possibilities about how we could portray this. And that's what's so exciting, is that those conversations that weren't possible before, that you've had to go through, like some of the conversations you've had to have of people not realizing and then the penny dropping, those conversations weren't possible before. And before, as we know, I mean, some of this, obviously your work, we're celebrating today what the work is doing, but we have to also acknowledge that it's also come about because of the great need to counter abuse, and that people have had horrific experiences on set of being abused, being harassed, as Meredith said of her students as well. So we really want to guard against that, and it's that safe holding space that you're providing that prevents some of those things happening. And that's what's so important, isn't it, and urgent. And that's what, when we had that explosion with Me Too and Harvey Weinstein, that became very globally apparent. It's not like we didn't know. We knew it was happening, but it became aware in a different way. And also that there were solutions, that we don't just stay with that dialogue, that narrative of oppression, that we go beyond it into saying what can be done. And you're giving people a template that says, this is how we stop abuse happening, this is how we make sure there's trust, and there's incredible artistry and creativity in the production. So just thank you for giving us the whole picture there, because I know it's really involved what you're providing. But thank you. And I'm sure you've seen some amazing stories of it actually working. So as we're celebrating, would you like to share some of those where, things where it's really helped and supported a production to create beautiful, intimate content?
So yes, thank you for those reflections. And just before I say about that, um, yeah, just to reflect on, leading up and to the incredibly brave women who came forward around the Weinstein allegations. As you said, it wasn't as if it wasn't spoken about. It was always a running thing of, oh, sex scenes, they're so hard to do. And then also the two statements of, but oh, you're an actor. This is what your job is. So you just, say nothing and get on with it. And then if you did say anything, if you did say no in any way, shape, or form, that concern that you would, suffer for it, that you would be the one that, well, I've had this, when when I run the workshops, I invite, people to share when the work has been done well, but when the work hasn't been done well, and sort of, I think there was a rape to be performed, and this particular actress said that, the director was sort of saying, just go for it. And she was going, oh, okay, can we just pause? Can we just, take a moment just to talk about, okay, what you want, how we can journey through this, what a structure might be. And that actor was the one that everybody turned to her and said that she was the one that's unprofessional.
Wow.
I know, because she was trying to invite, a bit of a professional structure rather than this just going for it. That was, when people just ploughed in, which is exactly what happened before, that sense of who you are personally, and then what you're offering and giving of yourself artistically for character gets completely muddied because there is no separation. With the industry saying we have to do better, we can no longer turn a blind eye, and the codes of conduct that were drawn up at the time, and like you say, and then within that I was able to say, okay, and now within the industry's intention to do better, the industry's intention that we will create a structure, we will create code of conduct, so we will work with respect across the board for everybody. I was there able to say, and now within that intention, here's a structure through which we can create the intimate content in a good way.
Fantastic. So greatly needed and so important, and then has facilitated, as you say, instead of us having to have these dreadful instances of people just being left without any resources and just thrown into situations that can be very, very exposing and damaging. You've now got a holding place for everyone to be able to approach with confidence that kind of material and be creative with it, and it be a celebration,
Yes.
and serve the storytelling, which is what I know something you talk about a lot, is how do we support the storytelling and the character, as you say,
Yeah.
getting that distance between me, the actor, or and the actual story or the character I'm playing, so I don't have to take this personally, or I don't have to therefore be personally abused or personally harassed by that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that clear journeying through. So first of all, as you were saying before, when it was sort of like, one, people were embarrassed to talk about intimate content, so you've got situations where a director or a producer might be actually abusive around this content and using it for that power play. But most of the time, and many times, actually you've got a producer or director, when there wasn't a clear process in order to professionally journey through this content, there was just embarrassment. People are embarrassed to talk about intimate content, and especially when there wasn't the forum to be able to really consider it artistically. Everybody was avoiding the elephant in the room.
Yes.
And of course, in that place, there's no artistry that can really come to it, because everybody's just like, deep breath, eyes closed, and just go for it. And in that place, how can anybody create anything that's actually going to mean that they can consciously, with presence, with artistry, bring the best of themselves, be it the director, bring the best of what their vision is for what they want, or the actor bring the best of their skills as an actor to this character and this character storytelling in the moment. The DOP, how can the director of photography be able to bring all their skills to this intimate content when the actors have been thrown in? I just worked with the most beautiful director of photography last year, incredibly experienced, and they were saying that they've had situations where they sort of said, that's the room. The director sort of sent the two actors in, sent the director of photography in, and closed the door and said, look, let them get on with it, and you like be the fly on the wall that films it. And it's like, and who they were saying just how embarrassing and how mortifying that is for everybody involved.
Yes.
But they were saying how mortifying it was for them. And what was so lovely was then when I checked in with that director of photography at the end of our, production together last year, they were able to say, for the first time, I have been able to bring all of my skills as a DOP to this intimate content, the same as I would have done any other scene, and the joy of being able to consider this is the content. Now let's artistically look at where the camera can be. Sometimes the camera is inside them, sort of circling around them. Sometimes it's, like a fly on the wall. But we've been able to just journey through. We've also been able to consider beautiful artistic, references, like from nature, or from art, from paintings and artists, looking at different qualities, different textures, and so they were all creatively working to an artistic palette that we can all get behind, and and so that's what's possible.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And I just know that I've heard your work talked about in those ways, and that people have said of the depictions of intimacy that they are so beautiful and so real and so stunning, and people have been so moved. I think particularly over lockdown, wasn't it Normal People, that people were very, very moved by, and just the accolades for the portrayal of intimacy in a time when none of us could be close to the people that we loved, and there was so much separation anxiety happening, but it was so comforting and beautiful for people to witness that. So that's one of your, I know, just one of many amazing success stories there.
And what I'm interested in and what I'm focusing on, because for myself being an actor, is that knowledge that what leaves an actor exposed is when you are just left reeling, and you're sort of somehow exposing yourself because you haven't been able to really interrogate why, this moment, why is this scene here? How is it pushing the storytelling forward? What does it tell us about each of these characters and each of these characters in relationship? What is the emotional arc that's right the way through this scene? And then listening to that all the directors thoughts and visions, listening again. I'm also in the actor director rehearsal along with the DOP. I'm that's not for me, that's for them to have that free play of interrogating the script, talking about it. Where are these characters now? What's this moment saying? And I'm just listening. I'm listening both to what they're saying. I'm also listening to the impulses, or what they're offering from themselves. And I'm listening also to sort of perhaps where they're reticent, that they might not be saying no outright, but I'm listening to what their body's telling me, or what the timbre of their voice is telling me. That they're freely going with, or where they might be a bit reticent about it. And then once that basic shape is explored, then I'm absolutely lifting that and then bringing that into then that clear choreography. So again, there's no seamless, there's no moment of this is the emotional content up until the intimate moment, and then now it's just physicality. No, it is absolutely about, this is what's the emotional storytelling that takes you through the arc of the storytelling, and the actor staying emotionally connected, because every single moment is part of the storytelling. And I feel, I've had people say to me that's what the difference was, that was that the emotional storytelling absolutely was connected. And again, Paul speaking about that, which was so lovely to see and hear in some of the press, that again, that's my intention, that that when you interrogate the script, allowing the actor to be full of who this character is, so there's not a single moment that a movement isn't sharing something that's telling part of the storytelling, so that the actor never feels exposed. And then that's what allows both the actor to be full and feel comfortable, because everything's serving character and storytelling and relationship. And then that's where, as an audience, then we can feel comfortable, because we stay completely engaged in the character arc, the character narrative. And then the other side, the other aspect that I think is really important is then that anatomically, what's choreographed is also anatomically correct, so that again we stay believing in it. And for me, certainly the times that I've seen intimate scenes where suddenly the anatomy doesn't read right, I'll be with it, and then suddenly that anatomy just is jarring, and then I'm out of it, because I go, well, now I don't believe it. Somebody hasn't done their job. Or certainly in the days before intimacy coordinators, where there was nobody, been able to bring that sense of clear, detailed choreography, to the anatomy of what was choreographed, then, and the actors again were just doing their best, but suddenly then I'm out of it. So I also believe that that's a really important part of it, is that we're bringing detailed choreography that really serves these characters, serves the storytelling.
Absolutely. And also, what I'm hearing is you're giving something that every single step, every single movement, just as you would with a dance, it's something that everybody has agreed to. Like, I've agreed my left foot goes there, your left elbow goes here, and it's a dance, and therefore everyone has said yes to every movement. Whereas before, if you've just been asked into something that you're not sure about and you don't know where you're going, and it's just fumbling around, isn't it? And then it won't read accurately. Whereas if you've completely designed that arc, and that's where also consent is not just about saying yes to the whole thing. Yes, of course, you said yes as an actor, I'm going to do this job with this intimate content, but then there's all the mini yeses every time, every movement. I've said yes to that, and then you see that in a person's body, that they're comfortable with it because they've agreed it, and then just like a dance, they can let go into just, oh wow, now we spin, now we this, now we move, and it's beautiful. It becomes something that everyone can enjoy rather than being embarrassed and awkward and clumsy about. Absolutely.
That's right. I had the joy of doing an interview with, along with Anton Dubois, who of course is one of the beautiful dancers from Strictly Come Dancing, and it was great having the conversation with him present, because he absolutely got it. He was saying, yes, for us to get up on a Saturday night and do a really brilliant tango, we've had to do a whole week of rehearsals, and it takes a blimmin', many hours of rehearsals to make that one, minute and 30 seconds look spontaneous, free, exciting, fun. Because that's what it takes to have a body memory, to have a body dance that then has gone past that place from feeling like you're patting your, your stomach and hitting your head, and through to, gaining the techniques, having the techniques under your belt, through to then being able to be free and released and really artistic. And that was part of what was leveled at the intimacy guidelines, was that to, as you say, to give boundaries, to give choreography, was actually to dumb down creativity. But actually, of course, as you said, it's the opposite, that when you bring in that, proper artistic pathway through to considering the intimate content, and then the clear choreography, then actually you're opening up creativity for everybody.
Yes. And that's a great, wonderful paradox and beauty in life, I think, is that relationship between structure and dynamism and boundaries, and how, and we can see it very clearly with children, how children need boundaries to play. For example, if we want to play freely as a child, you need to be inside a playground, otherwise they're going to run out in the street and there's going to be a car crash. So, so we have to have some boundaries for our children, and we understand that when we're bringing up children, but we also need that in any kind of situation where there's exposure and risk. Whether you're jumping out of a plane doing a bungee jump, you wouldn't want to just do that without any structure or without any harnesses, would you? Because you'd be terrified and it would be terribly dangerous. So, so this is why these structures are there as containers, and therefore the creativity can flow through them and within them. And there's a path, isn't there? A pathway for the artistic content.
That's really lovely, actually, the idea of a bungee jump. My partner actually did a bungee jump over Lake Tapau when we went traveling in New Zealand, and actually somebody was tying his feet, and then before he was about to go, they said, oh no, hold on a minute, and I had to retie it because someone had not tied it quite right. So and Russell was saying that every cell of his body was nervous, and every cell of his body when he was jumping off was going, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. So it is incredibly challenging for an actor. Can you imagine having to been asked to take your clothes off in front of, okay, we've got a closed set, so we're trying to look as a minimum amount of people possible, and then also to be exploring simulated sexual content with someone that you might have only met, like yesterday, literally yesterday. to suddenly be portraying people who have loved each other for 5 years. It's a tall order. It's a tall order you're asking your actors to do. But just like the bungee jump, and this is it, it's not that the structure is going to suddenly take away any nerves or take away the fact that it's taking an actor to an edge and is challenging. But there's also that, just like doing a bungee jump, you're doing it because you want to do it. You're doing it because there's something about being alive. There's, and as an actor, we're telling these characters as storytellers because there's something about us being alive by taking on board this person's life, this person's emotional journey that's, telling us something more about who we are. But you need all of those safety things. You need someone to be able to, tie the bungee jump well. You need someone to say, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to sit at the end. You're going to put your feet over. You're going to wait. You're going to count 1, 2, 3. We've got people down at the bottom in the lake, in their boat, that are going to come along and they're going to catch you, that they're holding the space. Everybody's holding the space for you in order to have this experience, in order to be able to have this mad, courageous, frightening experience in a really good and pleasurable way. And we're here to catch you. Literally, we're here to keep you safe. So yes, it's a really good analogy of what we do as intimacy coordinators.
Wow, I'm glad that resonated, and it's really, really beautiful what you're doing in holding people in those potentially very exposing spaces. And it makes me also think about how, well, in ancient times, actors it was very ritualistic, wasn't it? And if we think back to sort of shamanic ritual, where a lot of theatre came probably from, we think, when we look at it anthropologically, it really was about the actor or the medicine man giving themselves and going into trance and going into another space on behalf of the whole community to tell a story or to get some medicine, and that the myths and the stories that they were telling, and they had to completely embody and be in. But around those rituals, there were always a lot of structures and a lot of what we know as ritualized activity. And we are not really that different from that these days, but we just have lost sometimes touch with the sense of that sacredness of holding a sacred space, of holding a boundaried space. And I don't mean sacred in the sense of it has to be religious, but it just means to be safe. And that therefore we can then go into these altered spaces where an actor can take on and go into and embody. I even recall when I trained in theatre being asked to play a child that was being abused by her mother, and how very scary that was to embody that and to really go into that place and what that meant. And you are being asked to go into these very deep places. And it was actually, funnily enough, one thing that propelled me into working in sort of holistic therapy and working with people was like, hey, hang on, this is amazing, but we need to keep people safe here. We need to have also, because it's potentially very rich as well. It's potentially very transformational. If it's held well, it can be such a transformational thing. You could have someone who has actually been abused really feeling empowered from going through acting it out, but knowing that they're safe this time around, and if they're held well, it can become very, very empowering for them to transform their story, and then also to offer that story to the world and say, hey, look, this happened to me, but it doesn't have to happen for you, or this story, we're telling this story so perhaps this doesn't happen again. Perhaps we're more aware of what might stop it happening, So the actor is really giving themselves in service to a greater story, to a greater theme, to a greater purpose that will move and touch potentially through film millions of people potentially. So amazing.
That's right. Yes, so there's actually a fantastic book called The Death and Resurrection Show, written by a guy called Rogan Taylor, and that is about his exploration is that actors are the modern day shamans, that actors are the shapeshifters. We shift, we take on a character and we're shifting into that, and we're exploring what it's like to live life in this character's shoes and explore their dramas and their emotional storytelling. And I really, sort of feel that that is the case. and then the next part of that is absolutely part of that shamanic work is setting an intention, setting your intention, so that then within that you can go free to find out what the learning, what the information, what the medicine is from that. And actually, as you were saying that, it really made me think that all of the work that we do as intimacy coordinators in preparation is all of that, is all journeying through setting your intention with what the intimate content is going to be, setting your intention with what nudity is going to be there, setting your intention with what's where you're happy to be touched. And then once all of that is in place, that agreement and consent is put in place for a degree of nudity similar to sexual contact and touch, then you can flow free, and so absolutely, setting your intention, but that's happening in all those ways through that process, in order that the performer then can just release into exploring where that takes them, where the shape shifting of them going free. So again, sometimes people, well, we do choreograph really clearly, but also within that shape, then there's freedom within that, within sort of like, you're going to kiss lips, then you're going to sort of kiss down neck, down the center of the body, lift the person up. Within that, then there's freedom to be, again, as it's just as you were saying, that those two sides of giving structure to allow freedom. Within that, then you can be free and on impulse each and every take, and the director then can go, okay, on that take you sort of had more gravitas, perhaps this time bring more fun. So it's the same structure, but there's still freedom for impulse, freedom for creativity to flow through, freedom for that relationship in the moment with your fellow, actor, or so you're doing a moment of self-pleasure, yourself with self. So within our structures, then there's freedom to fly. And that's where then you get something that's really exciting. We're all on our edge, because it is on the edge. It is just, you're in relationship in that moment, in that reality, each and every performance.
That's wonderful. And yeah, in the now, it can become that really live experience. And that's when the intimate content feels so present, because everyone can be present. They're not kind of wondering what's going to happen next. They know it's been choreographed, so they can relax into it. And that's also, I know that your work, because it involves consent and having that consent to every step of that beautiful choreographed journey, that has an application, a wider application that's now being used in schools. So perhaps you could share a little bit about that, because of course the sexual journey that you've described people having on set is also, those issues come up for us in life as well. Like when you know that someone has said yes to something and wants it, actively wants it, then of course you're going to feel, hopefully have a much better time together, right? Than if you feel, hey, they're hesitating, but I'm not sure if they want this or not, or these kind of things that come up around consent just in everyday life. This is really important, isn't it? These are really, really important conversations to be able to have, and for people to have them openly. And they're now coming into schools with your work. Is that right?
So yes, I've been really sort of like just taken aback and I say delighted. That feels too frivolous, because it's been so profound. From my intention to just put in place a really proper bog standard actor director process for the intimate content. Inherently within that there's safety, but that was the intention, and journeying through, particularly through 2019, just putting that best practice in place. But then seeing out in our audience, out in the world, the ripple effects of that. So for example, the impact of the top of episode 2 for Normal People, where Marianne has her sexual awakening. Again, I was just honoring Lenny's direction and each and every beat of Sally Rooney's beautiful writing that had written in it, that gradually, the dialogue, gradually, standing, undressing, pleasuring each other. Again, which is, there is also, what's beautiful is the autonomy of both parties. There's not one being done to. There's a real equality of giving and taking. And then Marianne's character asking for protection, and that being, yes, so that's what you want, and then being able to journey through, acknowledging that, putting it on, kind of putting that protection on, keeping that sense of play, sexual play and openness and connection together, and then into the invitation of continuous consent, that first time intercourse can sometimes be a bit uncomfortable. So acknowledging that and offering that continuous consent and inviting that as part of their sexual connection with each other and their sexual play. Yes. So those are all the aspects that were in that storytelling. And, we knew that was an important scene, but just head down, very, pragmatically honored the storytelling. The impact of that has been amazing. People saying to me, how positive that has been for our young people. And then, as you say, being contacted by secondary schools, being told that that scene is being used in the sex education for young people in secondary schools to help them see the positive depiction of first time sexual encounter. Wow. And then yes, and then also with sex education, right from the get-go, the very, very first conversation I had with John Jennings and Ben Taylor was acknowledging, we all had a teenager, or I'd certainly, my kids were teenagers at the time, them also having, young kids, saying about being aware about how often our young people were turning to pornography because how easily accessible it was now. There isn't a forum where people can not know about what's the anatomy of our sexual expression, and then to be taught. And that's something that I really believe needs to change, and our young people feeling that they have to know, that they can't be shown to be uneducated in how to have their sexual expression. And so turning to pornography, and of course the adult industry is the oldest industry in the world. It's absolutely brilliant and right in its place. But when it's used for our young people as their primary education for how they think their sexual expression should happen, and not just their sexual expression, but the relationship, the emotional and psychological connection with their first time partners, or even if they choose it to be a one night stand, fine, great. But to have a template out there that allows for the questioning, for the not knowing, allowing our young people to know that they don't have to know, to be able to discover together with a new first time partner, to be able to fumble around and knowing that that's okay. So sex education was absolutely fantastic, and that intention for that whole series, that it could possibly be an alternative for our young people to see and explore the questions, the possible questioning, ethnicities, different, gay relationships, heterosexual relationships, queer relationships, trans, explorations with bodies, self-expression. All of it is just so positive. I remember there was a scene with season 2, and I'd read it, and then I was doing a different scene, and I sort of said to Ben Taylor, "Oh my goodness, I've read that episode." And he says, "Do you think it's too much?" And I said, "Well, I certainly got an education from that, but it's brilliant, but it's utterly brilliant." And this was around anal hygiene, if you're going to have anal, intercourse. But it's brilliant, utterly brilliant. It's so important. And again, helping people to breathe a sigh of relief, to know that they can explore and discuss this. They don't have to know, and actually, they can bring, allowing people to release into who they are as sexual beings, especially our young people's sexual awakening, and to have a more honest dialogue with everybody around us, around educating ourselves around it.
That's just so exciting. That is just so exciting. The ripple out effect of that in terms of having healthy conversations, healthy representations in media, so that there are a variety of things on offer. And as you say, not just the porn industry, which is sometimes designed with different purposes and different than perhaps young people might need in that moment. So, yeah. So it's really, really valuable what you're doing in terms of increasing and widening representation and opening out the conversation so it is inclusive and it is safe and it's healthy and it's fun and playful and
Yeah.
juicy and all of those gorgeous things as well, you know, so that it's really a wonderful spectrum of opening out. And so therefore, again, we're not clamping down through structure, we're opening out the possibilities of healthy sexual expression, not
And I think
just
that
yeah,
and I
yeah,
think
not
that's why normal people also were so positive in its charting of these young people over 4 years. It wasn't just about falling in love and then it all going wrong and then the fallout from that end. You know, they had this coming together, this amazing connection, but then their inability to be able to really communicate verbally, and their emotional and psychological wounding that each of them were holding. So then, you know, that falling apart but then coming back together, and then apart again and then coming back together. So it showed a healthy way of how we can make mistakes, we can not know, not just sexually and intimately but emotionally and psychologically. And but there's a journey through that, and what these two people had is, you know, while the mismatch and the time that they didn't communicate, which was so infuriating. And we were saying that when we were filming it, so you just want to bash their heads together and go, for God's sake, Connell, you know, just off. And you know, but that's what was so positive. And I really felt that for my children during those teenage years, is it's not falling in love or those first encounters, is actually how you healthily and respectfully navigate falling out of love and separating. That's actually the full arc of an intimate relationship. And how often are we really, you know, our young people really taught about that? You know, and that's been amazing that some of the stuff that I've been able to work on has navigated that and given again some healthy templates, and including Then I May Destroy You, just you know, just the honour of being invited in to work on that incredible script, on Michaela's, first of all, her incredible bravery of her making her own life into art, watching her and learning from her regarding her self-care, about her boundaries, about her seeking and eliciting support both emotionally and psychologically when needed, so that she could stay artistically healthy in order to be able to continue telling Arabella's story, because of course Arabella's story is different to hers.
yes.
But sometimes she could be activated by her journey of telling Arabella's story. The complexity in particular, I think, is so fantastic of Papa's you know, character's story, particularly of his assault. You know, you see how the police have got so much better and have really clear processes in place for female assault. But when it was a male queer assault, you could see that the police had no forum in which to really acknowledge that it was an assault, and therefore to be able to support that victim and to be able to then give them, you know, to take on board what had happened to them, and then have those interviews to be able to take that situation, you know, for all the impact and all the you know, wrong that was done to that character, and how that character was left reeling with the pain and the confusion of what had actually happened, trying to unpick it. And when his violation wasn't acknowledged in a respectful way, you know, the terrible impact that has on that character. And again, out in our world, you know, everybody that has experienced these grey areas, you know, that's the worst, isn't it? It's very clear, there's a very clear violation, but actually most of our abuses happen in the grey area, don't they? You know, so I hope that, again, yeah, I hope that perhaps the police will consider their processes when someone makes a complaint in that way, so that we open it out, that everybody is given the same process and respect and confidentiality that the character of Arabella was given when she came forward with you know, speaking about her assault.
Absolutely, and this is why this is doing such great service, that you know, these stories are being told, and that then provokes society to think about these things and to, there's a story for the police there to act on. There's a story for wider society to consider and then act upon. And there were two really things I just wanted to draw out from. You said so much there. That firstly, the sort of the holistic nature of an intimate relationship, because so often in media, sex has become objectified and sort of separated from the emotional and psychological journey that is involved in becoming intimate with someone. That it's never just about two bodies rubbing together. There's the whole person involved, and that you are, through your work, on helping people honour the holistic nature of both designing that as a story, but also then that is transferring to life, that we transfer to understanding, more fully understanding intimacy as a full emotional, psychological, as well as a physical journey, you know. And then what you also mentioned about with Michaela, about the importance of then taking self-care for all levels of our being, and how important that is, because and how you're providing the template for people, like in a way it's like self-care for the whole production, isn't it, that you're putting in place. And then, you know, also yourself, because I'm aware of just how much you've carried and given. So how do you care for you as well in the middle of all of that?
So absolutely, and that's where you come in, because especially in the early days, trying to shift structures and try and bringing in processes and procedures when it's been perceived that actually, you know, to bring in time and space to rehearse, to put in place a structure for those open conversations, that it's going to disrupt. Pushing, you know, in the early days, I was using this gesture because it really was pushing back. But actually, you know, and every time I was personally challenged, because I would, you know, have a first AD, you know, when I'm trying to speak about gender parity in the crew on a heterosexual sex scene when we have nothing but a male crew. And it meant that without thinking about it, what was going to happen was that lone female with her male actor on top of her with nothing but a male crew, you know, that was going to be her experience of this masculine gaze on her experience. But at that point, I was told by, you know, when I was trying to bring up that conversation, well, first of all, when I had the conversation with a male American producer, male British producer, male director, and male first AD, and then the male first AD, well, this is about me, so I can't be part of this conversation, and walks off. And you go, it's got nothing to do with you. This has got everything to do with protecting and trying to give the best environment for this lone female in nothing but otherwise a very, you know, an utterly male environment. And then I got you know, asked the producer asked me to come and speak to them, and I got told that I was now affecting the production adversely, and that as for asking the actors what they want, we'll have none of that. And that's really hard to take, you know. So again, your support, so your part, you know, your huge part in my personal self-care, and again, it's a big learning curve for me. Instead of coming away and just feeling I have done wrong, that I wasn't good enough, that I've not been, that I've done wrong, imploding, actually unpicking it, and that sense of professionally looking at, okay, what happened here? You know, what's the learning from this? What is my responsibility, and what can be done about this? And invariably, always, it has been, if something's gone wrong, looking at clear processes and looking at, okay, when should I have actually spoken about gender parity in the crew? You know, so I started speaking about it a week before, but actually that was too late. You know, for example, with John Jennings and Ben Taylor on sex education, we spoke about gender parity in the crew on that very first conversation. That was already in their minds, and so that was seamlessly supported and journeyed through. It takes time to provide the right crew and bringing in gender parity. You can't just suddenly magic someone up, and you can't suddenly have say a third AD sort of step up and hold the space of the first AD if actually they're not equipped for it and not experienced enough. So that equally would leave people vulnerable. So again, you know, with your work, it's partly looking at what my responsibility is, what the impact has been on me, how that's affected me, the language that was perhaps used to me is one thing, but then also looking at, okay, you know, let's professionally look at what now needs to be put in place in my professional structure. When, at what point should that conversation have happened so that I wouldn't have had that backlash, so that it wasn't suddenly confronting, that it didn't suddenly seem like I was blaming, you know, the people in the, you know, who held that power as men. It was actually just put forward as best practice, you know, going forward, and then therefore was offered in good enough time so that it could be facilitated in a relaxed and professional way rather than suddenly the rush.
That's right. And there's been so many incidences where, obviously, because this was a very new and pioneering role that you were pioneering and nobody knew, right? So this was all new for everyone. It was new for you, it was new for the productions. And so for you, having that self-care and that space to reflect rather than, and that's what I think then protects us from completely imploding, because if we're on our own, then of course we will tend to we may tend to do our habitual strategies of responses, which is often fight or flight, and or as you say, imploding or getting very defensive or whatever those things are. And so we have to process all of those responses and acknowledge that they're valid, they're sort of survival responses, but then work through and say, well, actually there's something in this for me. What wisdom can I get out of this? What can I transform from this difficult situation? What can I learn? And also allowing us, continuously, we've had to say, isn't it, that this is new. This is completely new. We're having conversations that nobody's ever had before. So of course there's going to be bumps. Of course there's going to be times when we're in territory that we don't know, or things that we hadn't thought of. Suddenly we get on a set and we go, oh, I've just realised something's not up. This is somehow still not set up now. Even though we've done X, Y, and Z, we still need Y as well. So this is really where the space for self-reflection is so important. And that's what I really want to, yes, you've had global accolades, and rightly so, but I also want to congratulate you on that inner work that you have been willing to do and that I have been graced to witness, because when we do the inner work on ourselves and the inner reflection, then the external results follow from that, and it's something that again is not always understood, but when we do understand the relationship between taking really good care of ourselves and how actually that fuels us to then do extraordinary things in the world, and self-care is not about bubble baths and spa days. I mean, it can be, if that's that's just the external manifestation of having a good relationship with yourself ultimately, and having that reflection with self.
Absolutely. And this is where, I advocate for all of my practitioners to have in place their form of, sounding out, yes. And for me, sort of, that's, it's a tough job to hold. As I say, that the day on set, very often people look at us and think we're not doing anything, but actually it's all in that inner seeing and that inner sort of like having been aware of how this director works as opposed to how the actor works, as to how one actor works and what the concerns are of another actor, and that body listening and that constant listening. I had a director commenting that that the talent is to be aware of the landscape and to be constantly negotiating, and it is that on set. And so, yeah, very often the day after there's been a full day on set, I'll have a headache, a stress headache, because it's been from that kind of support and holding and that focus to both hold the space lightly, but also to be negotiating that inner listenings, offering different strategies, different movement techniques, checking out, is the room warm enough, sort of who to ask for, how to ask for it. Everybody has their role as well. The first AD is by the time they get to be a first AD, an expert in holding the floor, invariably will also be an expert in holding closed sets. So it's like, not for me to go over and say, right, I'm now telling you how to hold a closed set. No, it's like, tell me how you work. Let me, tell you perhaps a couple of things I'm bringing in. How can we both support each other to hold a good space? But all of that negotiation is with everybody. And
it's a lot of fine tuning, isn't it? It's a lot
it
of
is a lot of
fine tuning and fine relating, and there's a lot that can go on there, and it's also often under quite a lot of significant pressure, especially on set, right? Because you have the time limitations are often, or the time deadlines are pretty intense, aren't they? So amazing, and so that's amazing that you are both taking support for yourself and encouraging others to, because you're holding so many relationships, so many, it's like I can see them like threads that you're
Yes,
kind of
that's
like
right.
weaving together, which is amazing. And there's so much we've talked about, and I just want to thank you really so much, because, and thank you for your bravery to do that, to encourage people to take care of themselves around intimate content, and for providing such a beautiful journey and structure for people to be safe, and your willingness to then extend that out into the world, and your ability to see the holistic levels, which is just so finely tuned, that enables you then to weave all those threads and bring them together. So thank you, Ita. It's just
Thank
extraordinary,
you. Well,
really.
like, I could not be where I am now without you. And it's the art started, before all this, with my connecting with you. And I thank so much. It's my lovely practitioner Leonie Holt that recommended you to me, so I have to thank her. And yes, that you are such an absolutely fundamental and integral part in the development of the intimacy guidelines. So thank you for your beauty, for your wisdom, for your groundedness, for your boundaries, for your challenging of me, and your offering, your reflections and your insights. So there's so much love and gratitude to you from me.
Oh, Ita, it's been an extraordinary journey, and I am just, yeah, so grateful to you, really. And I have learnt so much myself from your journey, and your willingness to put yourself on the line, literally many, many times for this purpose. And you have been so not driven, but guided, I think is a better word. You've been guided by a very deep sense of purpose that is really about serving people and helping people at this moment, when it is really, the world really wants this work, and the world really needs this work, and is asking for, let's have intimacy and sexual expression be healthy for all of us. Let's have that can be, and how brilliantly beautiful and gorgeous that can be. And the work that you're creating reflects that and inspires people on so many ways. So thank you so much. Thank you for your willingness and your courageousness and your creativity. It's just amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Really.
Thank you, and thank you for coming on today to talk to us all. And just want to say thank you again to everyone who's listened to this conversation. If you want to find Ita's work, your website is Ita O'Brien.
Intimacyonset.com. Well, there's both. There's itaobrien.com and then intimacyonset.com.
Fantastic. So you can see all and read more about Ita's amazing work and connect with her there. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you again, Ita O'Brien, for the work you're doing in this world and for being you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Katie Rose, for the work that you're doing in this world and for you being you.
Hooray, up the revolution. Thank you.